I'm Wendy Farrier, one of the trustees at ISBL. I'm just introducing this session. We're looking at wellbeing this afternoon. It's going to be a very interactive session, so please feel ready to ask questions and engage with the panel. And we're looking at leading with care and equipping our schools for wellbeing success. Today we have Joe Taylor from Howden's, who's going to moderate the session, and we have Greig Trout, Wellbeing Educator, Director of Kindness at charity 52 Lives, and Director of Life Skills Company, Life.
I'm just going to keep adding titles to my...
Amazing, great, very welcome, Greg. Dr. Dominique Thompson, Young People's Mental Health Expert, TEDx speaker, author and educator, and Simon London, CEO, Empower Learning Academy Trust. So please engage well with this session and hope you get the best out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, I'll just take a couple of minutes. Oh, hi, come in. Come on in. You'll be pleased to know we've only got a couple of slides, just by way of introduction for those of you who don't know me. Thank you, I'm Joe. I lead the education and charity team at Howden. Again, for those of you who don't know, Howden and weren't at the drinks reception last night. We were a global insurance broker. We're an employee-owned business, so we're a little bit different to some of the other insurance brokers out there. Why are we doing a wellbeing session if we are an insurance broker? We invest a lot of time into the sectors that we serve and now provide a wellbeing solution and help schools on their wellbeing initiatives and strategies. Hence we're hosting this panel discussion today. We also launched last year a wellbeing advisory board where we give education across primary, secondary, HE and FE an opportunity to come together and talk about the challenges that the sector are facing, whether that's for their staff, their children or their wider community, including their parents. We've already said this is going to be, sorry, my clicker's not. Oh, there we go. Let's focus on what is possible. We just wanted to address the fact that we are aware that there isn't a bottomless pit of money sat within this sector. There are financial challenges. But what we wanted to do, we can't change that, unfortunately. It's not within our gift as much as we'd love to. But what we are aiming to do today throughout this discussion with these three experts is give you something tangible to take away back to your school environment. As was said at the beginning, we want this to be engaging as possible. We've got some preset questions to kick off the conversation, but please feel free to take the time to... We've got a QR code that you can scan if you don't want to put your hand up and ask questions. But by all means, if you're equally happy to put your hand up and ask a question publicly, we'll pause the discussion and come to you for questions. Like I say, we want you to take as much of this away as you can. So, without further ado, I know you've had a brief introduction, but can I just hand over to you guys to do a little bit more of an introduction, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
How much?
I think we allowed 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Greg. I'm the Director of Kindness at Charity 52 Lives. I run something called the School of Kindness. We run free workshops in primary schools all about empowering children to understand how their actions can have a significant impact on the world, not just the world they live in, but also on their own mental and physical health. And I run a life skills company called Life 101. I've experienced cancer twice in my life and struggled with PTSD, which led me into this world of well-being and trying to understand how my mind and body work. And they're all things that I wished I'd learned at a much earlier age. And so since then, my passion's really become about education. I think education is the key to establishing a healthy, happy world. If we can understand how we function, then hopefully we can instill these tools into children so they're able to regulate, they're self-aware, they understand how they function as a human being. And that's really, really my passion. And staying well as well and helping others be well. And I think, we were chatting earlier, I think education is the key. I think teachers, school environments, this is where the change needs to happen. I think we're living in a society that's not conducive to health and well-being, and that needs to change. And that needs to change in schools as well.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah. Hi everybody, I'm Simon London. Excuse me, I'm from my phone. I'm CEO of Multi Academy Trust in the London Borough of Havering, so right on the border between Greater London and Essex, all on the curve of the M25, junction 29. We've got 6 schools, 3 primary, 3 secondary, None of those have a sixth form, so it's all kind of in the range up to the maximum of 16. Even though it's all in the one borough, which is great, means we can get to all of the schools in what we call the lunchtime rule. They are all very different. You know, one's got 40% disadvantage, the other one's got about 13. So there's a real mixed range in there. But we do all come together around the issue of well-being. I was a head teacher for 15 years. The last 5 of those I did the 2 jobs of head and CEO, and that was not good for my personal well-being. I had hair then. And for the last 3 years I've just been a CEO, and I'm very aware of the challenges you folks face because I work really closely with Andrew, my COO, and one of the things hopefully I'll talk about a little bit is kind of how we've done what I think is some really potent work in the wellbeing space at minimal cost. So I'll hopefully share that with you later.
Thanks, yeah, thanks, Dom. So my name is Dominique Thompson. I was a GP for nearly 25 years, and most of that was in a university where I was the head of department and where I developed my interest in young people's mental health. But what I was struck by was the increasing demand for support around mental health, well-being, distress, all of those sorts of issues were coming in the door much, much more at the sort of end of the 20 years than when I first started. And I started to ask myself, you know, what's going on and what can we do to address this in a sort of getting ahead of the problem kind of way, rather than just they arrive at university and at that age they're really struggling. So I actually stopped being a GP from a clinical point of view about 8 years ago and set up my own business to work with universities, schools, to give talks. I wrote a book called How to Grow a Grown Up about raising teens. That's for parents of teens and tweens. I have a teen myself, so thoughts and prayers to all of us. But he's a delight. No, he really is actually. I say that without laughing. So basically, I very much felt like we need to get ahead of this problem. There is something going on. What is going on? So I did a lot of thinking about what's happening, why it's happening, and how we can get ahead of it. And so all the work I do is sort of to try and get ahead of that, which is why the schools side of things is so important.
Thank you so much. Right, so I'm going to get straight into the questions. Like I say, please do, if you have any thoughts or views after we've gone around the panel about what we're discussing, please feel free to chip in, put your hand up. So Greg, I think we're going to start with you if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the first question we've got is, how can schools develop wellbeing strategies that reflect the unique needs of their communities, pupils, teachers, staff and parents?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think it has to be a collaboration. It needs to have everyone singing off the same page, pupils, parents, teachers, senior leaders, and when we can work with, you know, everyone involved in that school community, and they had play a part in actually coming up with a strategy to help everyone in that school community, then they're more likely to fulfill those attributes, those aims that principles that we're trying to put forward. And when they have that ownership as well, that we've helped make this happen, creating that strategy becomes much easier and much better for everyone else, because everyone's looking out for each other. And we don't want it just to be, it was the same with School of Kindness, we didn't want it to be a one-off workshop for schools, you know, that tick box, you know, we've covered kindness, we've covered well-being. It's creating a whole host of things that are just embedded in a culture. And I believe that happens, we can do that, we can achieve that through 4 ways. Through asking questions, through listening, through empathy, and through trust. Of course, asking those questions, are you okay? Is there anything that we can do to help you as a parent at home, whether it's a teacher, creating that openness where we can ask someone, is everything all right? How can we make things better? And just a story of how important that is, especially when dealing with parents, perhaps. When I was a child, and I was 7 when I had stage 4 cancer, I had an older brother, and my parents at the time, this was back in the 1980s, my parents at the time never thought to go and tell my brother's school what was going on at home. And eventually the school called up and said, look, Barry, my big brother, he's not speaking, he's not really socialising anymore, he's just gone very quiet at school, is everything all right at home? And it was then my parents said, oh yeah, this is going on. So with that, they were able to support him and give him the support that he needed. So asking those questions for everyone involved, and I'm a governor of our local high school as well, the ending question of our governor meeting is asking the head teacher, how are you? You know, do you feel supported? Are you okay? Because how many people are asking him that, you know? So it's so important to ask those questions. Listening, I heard a great talk, and it's become a wonderful friend now, by a head teacher called Dr. Jeremy Hannig. And he's a head teacher in Southall in southwest London. And he talks about slow leadership, you know, walking through the corridors just that little bit slower, making yourself open to listen to people, to hear what's going on in the staff room, to listen to parents, to really make himself accessible for everyone. And he's just found that's helped change that well-being in his school as well, making it much more open. So asking, listening, but practicing that empathy as well. Now, empathy is a real life skill, and it's something that really needs to be practiced. And I think children always taught, empathy is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. But what's stressful for one person might not be stressful for another. So it's really going back to the asking is what, again, is everything all right? How's your workload? What can we do to manage this? So, and that empathy is something that we really need to get hold of. And a perfect example, I was a crime scene investigator with the Metropolitan Police for 10 years in my early 20s. And when all my colleagues, they had families, they had children, and I was a single, 20-year-old, looking at the clouds. They would arrive late, school pickup was a nightmare, the traffic, or they'd have to leave early because they were picking up their children. And I had zero empathy as a 20-year-old because I was staying late, I was doing this. And I wish I could go back and kind of slap myself in the face now. Now, as someone with 3 children, they're doing the hardest job going. So it's about practicing that empathy and really asking those questions to find out how someone's feeling, to share what they're going through, to help them out. And of course, building that trust. And that all comes from the first 3 as well. When you build that trust, then parents are more likely to come and tell you what's going on at home. Teachers are more likely to come up to their senior leaders or their colleagues saying, I wouldn't mind a bit of a hand with this. And pupils as well, helping just have that trusting environment. So that strategy needs to come from everyone.
And I think, Greg, in the role of the work that you do with 52 Lives and School of Kindness, but also in your role as a governor, but also your role as a parent of 3 children, I think the challenges are absolutely get all of the skills that's needed to be able to do that, but how do you reach, how does it become a true whole school community thing where you're actually reaching the parents? Because I imagine that's a challenge. Certainly, even when you've got your wellbeing strategy set, sharing that, but we're talking here about, getting them really involved in setting the strategy as well. Yeah.
See, and if anyone wants to interject here as well, my panelists here, but it's very much, I think, providing parents and teachers with the data, with the stats, what's happening with regards to absences, even staff retention, pupil well-being, and then showing them the science behind strategy-based initiatives that we can implement in school. So having those figures, also listening into the playground, listening to what's happening with parents at pickup and hearing all that, but providing forums as well for parents to come to school to listen to this is what we're trying to achieve here, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why we're doing it. And this has worked here, but we think it can work here. What do you think? And really bringing them into the conversation. So they've got that ownership as well, where they can go, yeah, I can see this working. Because the thing is as well, with as a parent, my kids don't really listen to me. So we need that school environment because they look up to their teachers like gods, and we need that and to come from them. But also as a parent, I'm looking to the teachers in, they're gods to me as well. I'm looking for them for guidance as well. Even in my role, I still want to hear what they're doing and how they're coping and what's happening in that.
Yeah, thank you. Just as a quick, we talked about this being engaging. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Has anybody tried, within the wellbeing strategies you've already got, has anybody tried, that, oh, there we go, hands up, sorry. Yeah, welcome your thoughts.
Just how do you get the parents to come in and engage? That's our biggest.
Can I come in on that? Because that's something we're really grappling with in our trust because, like yourselves, we've got that high percentage of parents who do engage, particularly our primaries. Obviously we've got a slight difference in the secondaries, but having been a secondary head teacher and now working in a mixed trust, I've learnt a lot from, it's made me remember what we lose from just going from year 6 to year 7 and how we suddenly treat them differently and don't have that engagement. So we're really struggling, and I think what we've boiled it down to is we don't know what we don't know. We make a lot of assumptions, like we put out a newsletter every week that gets 80% engagement. That's really good. 20% on, isn't it? We put out social media things so that gets a load of engagement, but not everybody. We get parents' frustration builds when I didn't know this was happening, I didn't know that was the rule, I didn't know this was the thing. So we're starting a new strategy whereby we're trying to identify the hardest to reach parents and actually be more proactive in getting out there and understanding. Also in Howden, we've got a very changing demographic. So if there's a fire alarm and you look at year 11 compared to year 7, it's a very different profile. It's a much more diverse profile lower down the school. And again, we've not got the most diverse staff, so we're trying to reach out on our governing bodies and through our communities to understand them more. So we've got this kind of strap line at the moment, our strategy for our next 3-year strategy: connecting, expecting, protecting. How do we connect to people? What do we expect of them? What do they expect of us? And then, you know, what's the safeguarding, the protection in that? So that's our kind of strap line. I haven't fleshed it out yet, but you know, that's what we kind of sort of dining out on. So I totally agree with you, because you know, the other thing we're doing more central prescriptive policies. Are sort of the longer I do the role, the more I realise they're a good thing, not a bad thing, because you're controlling the variables. So we've got a policy now by, if you have a parent meeting, no matter what it is, even if you're bringing someone back because they've just been suspended for a week, or you're telling them some bad news, the last thing you finish with is there anything else the school can do for you? So they leave, and often they say no, but it might be something. It might be making a phone call to the town hall. So our pastoral staff, that is, I'm not saying they all do it all the time because it's relatively new, but that is the rule. Finish a meeting with, is there anything else the school can do for you? That's just some stuff we're kicking around.
Isn't that helpful?
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. Dom, do you have any thoughts on this before we move?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of related. I think, do you want to
Yeah, I
say
can
a bit
do.
more about the next question?
Okay, so of course.
Actually.
Yeah, sure. So in what ways can schools support parents' mental health, and why is this so crucial to improving pupil well-being?
So this is something that is really important. We have talked a lot about engaging with parents, getting them to think about their young person's well-being. Now, we sort of assume that, you know, for the vast majority of parents, that is something that they are talking about, interested in, and so on. But there will be some groups for whom that is not a topic that they are very comfortable with. They may still have, there's some stigma around it, you know, and so actually there may be times when we need to think about the language we use around it. So I'm sure you'll all think about this, but essentially, if you were going to, you know, send out a wellbeing newsletter, perhaps not always to use the terms mental health, for example, because there will be some who switch off from that. That's not us. We don't, you know, we don't have that. We don't have those problems. So I just think there's something about language, and tied to that, therefore, and perhaps to the lady's question about how to get the parents more engaged, would be to have your events that you will have around other topics like careers or you know, sort of open evenings or whatever it is, all the other events that you do, and weave in the well-being there and have maybe a talk that touches on mental health, but you don't necessarily label it sort of up front, so that it's accessible. You know, you're not saying we're holding a well-being and mental health talk, because some people won't want to go to that because they won't want to be seen to go to it, even though I obviously would hope that to encourage people to do that. It's the same if you have, like, we're having a talk on, I don't know, ADHD or autism. Like, a lot of people won't go to that, even if their children are struggling, because they themselves feel self-stigmatised and so on. So I think there's a lot around how we label this stuff and weaving it into the normal other events that you're having. So that was one thing about engagement and getting people to sort of think about it. Parental mental health matters because parental mental health predicts the child's mental health. So if you have parents who struggle with their mental health, their children are more likely to struggle with their mental health for lots of reasons, not just genetics. So, you know, if you're growing up in a household where your mum or dad is, you know, very depressed or has an addiction or has other issues going on, you are then more likely to struggle, not only with your own mental health, but perhaps because you're a carer or there are other stresses about life being unpredictable. So although schools roles is not obviously to to provide mental health support in the sort of therapeutic or clinical sense. There is loads that schools can do that is low cost and easy to do that will support the parents so that it impacts positively on the children. And I'm thinking of things like providing great resources that are very specifically, you've got all your general resources. I would always say, you can go to the Young Minds website or the Place to Be website. They're fantastic, they have loads for parents. But if you wanted something more specific, say in your newsletter, you could signpost parents, for example, if they have a child with ADHD, to some fantastic, there are therapists online, qualified therapists, I'm not talking about TikTok therapy, although some of them are on TikTok, but actual qualified, often former NHS or current NHS people who are doing things. So if it was ADHD, parents who have a child with ADHD, there's the @Get Twigged is what it's called. I'm happy to talk about this afterwards. If there is parents struggling with a child with anxiety, then Kat Taylor does loads of short videos around supporting the child with anxiety, all sorts of different things. So it's very tailored support, very specific support for specific challenges that parents are managing, which impacts their mental health and well-being, and then of course has that knock-on effect, because the more anxious you are as a parent, the more anxious you are to have, your child is likely to be. So those are some of the things. I guess it's around language, it's around how we provide really helpful, specific, useful, practical resources that says this is, these 5 top tips you can have if you're supporting a child with autism or something. And then I think, the final thing is hosting events, like we said, that might be mixed in with other things, but where there's quite open panel discussion afterwards, not just a talk, but a panel afterwards, getting people to be more involved in the Q&A, getting them to suggest the talks that would be really helpful. I know what it's like, I've also been a school governor for a long time, that people, say, oh, we really want a talk on, something, and then nobody turns up. But you can but try, can't you, in terms of that.
Just on that, and forgive me, I've worked with education for a long time, but I've not worked directly in a school. So apologies if this seems like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But I totally get the stigma around all this and why parents might not be engaged. So incorporating it into another platform, environment, discussion.
Yeah.
What sort of other platform, discussion, environment, and you guys might already know, would it be sensible to incorporate it? Because I can't think of something where you would do that, and maybe people have got experience of doing it already, but what would you have in mind?
Well, I would have thought that schools have all sorts of events throughout the year where parents come along, and I'm not saying you're going to do it at the Christmas Bazaar, but but there are plenty of events. And I mean, we've just been to the open evening for sixth form, okay? So we went around all the stalls and we looked at, we won't be doing physics, but we went around all the stalls and then there was a talk about going up to sixth form. Right, we'll weave it right in there. Yes. What do you need to know about how to support your young person's well-being as they go up into sixth form? And you've just woven it right in. And because they'll have younger kids, older kids, they'll have other people for whom it's helpful. So that's just one example. But we do this in universities when we want to reach our male students. Talk about mental health, you do not label it mental health, okay? I'm sorry, I have to say this is part of the problem is they won't go to where the mental health support is, we have to go to them, that's fine. So we do it in music workshops, we do it in sports stuff, we do it in all sorts of things, from dance and performing arts through to motorbike workshops. I mean, there's so many different places. The barber shop is a really popular one. Right. So that's the thing, is you go to where the people are and you talk about the topics and then you signpost to the useful resources.
Yeah, thank you. And again, sorry, over to you.
Yeah, just a very, very simple thing that we've learned through experience, which is that if you ask people to come because you want their advice, they will come. If you invite them in to tell them something, particularly if they're experienced, so a secondary background, particularly if their experience through primary school is that the only times they came into school were to hear bad news.
Yes.
Yet again, another, But if you invite them in to give advice, and the question that we would typically use, although it was often themed, we want your advice about journeys to school, we want your advice about, the question that we would always ask would start with, what do you want for your son or daughter 10 years after they left school?
Yeah.
We do a little imagination exercise, because the answer they always gave us is, we want them to be happy.
Yeah.
They would then say productive, active, there'll be other things in there, but happiness was the first answer. And that then allowed us to explain what we were doing as a school and why we were doing it. Because you said this is what you
Yes.
wanted. But that key
that's
for
great.
us was, and I have to say, I would add in there, and often those invitations had to be by phone. Because the people who don't come when you send out newsletters
Yeah, rather
Won't-
than just getting lost in a newsletter.
won't come when you send out an
Yeah.
email, and they won't come. Somebody's got to pick up the phone
Yeah.
and indicate to them that they're valued and interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just say to tie into what I was saying, I completely agree. But some of the parents who will disengage from the well-being/mental health, and even, you know, when you ask them what they want their child, some of them will say to be successful, and they are not necessarily the parents who put well-being at the top. And I'm sad to say there are quite a lot of parents who will push their child to do well because world's competitive. You've got to, you know, rather than think about well-being. So for those, you still want them to come in. So if they say successful, then maybe you get them through the careers in all the other talks. You know, you've still got to think there is that 20% who are not saying, I think this is a priority, or I've got to read what the school is doing, and that's, you know, that's the ones that I think we really need to be reaching as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, not at all. No,
Go ahead. No, please do.
I was just going to say, when you did that, did you survey them, or was it like a show of hands at an event? Did you ask them about what they want for their children? Was
No,
that something?
we looked at the people who hadn't come to parents' evening,
Right, okay.
and we looked to see whether there were any patterns or trends in those groups, and then we invited them to come in to offer us advice on things that we thought would be themed to their interests. So we had quite a big catchment area because of the public transport routes into the school, so it was kind of really weird shaped. And there was, and for some of the parents, getting to anything, this I have to say was, parents' evenings are now online, so some of what I'm talking about has changed. But at that time, these were the people for whom a journey to parents' evening was meant leaving work early, meant 2 hours on the road, plus the time, and so they weren't coming. So we had to find a reason to get them.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to question 3 if that's okay, and I think we're going to start with Simon. Given the time and resource constraints many schools face, what practical steps can leaders take to embed well-being into everyday school life?
So I'll just start by saying that's really helpful, your point there, because that's very much what we've experienced with one of our schools, the sort of diverse location, even crosses from 2 different boroughs and various things like that. So great suggestions to tie into the connecting piece. So just 3 quick things I thought I would share with you on this question about kind of how you resource this and how you develop it, which I know is very much most of your worlds, and, you know, trying to meet everybody's needs and demands. So I kind of thought of 3 Ps really. The first one is it doesn't really cost anything because it's your policies and your procedures, isn't it? So it's things like the simple email protocol when people can and can't contact one another. You know, we had an email protocol, but actually half the people weren't using it. So it was like lip service, so we really pushed that hard. The only problem with that first P, and I don't know if you find the same in your schools and trusts, but once you've done it for about 2 years, people forget it was ever a wellbeing thing. We don't do anything for wellbeing. What about the email protocol, the reduction in meetings, the change to half term, the blah blah? At the time, it was a sexy wellbeing headline grabbing thing, workload reduction, but we find it fades a little bit. But obviously policies and procedures do their job, and actually if they're implemented consistently and fairly, particularly when you're in a trust like ours, you know, people do say, how comes they get half a day for this a week? So we have to really make sure it's aligned. The second P is the sort of more challenging one, I think, which is your paid provision. So we pay for 2 big things, I suppose, across our trust. One is an employee assistance programme, HSF we use. That actually lands really well. It's a 24/7 GP line is the most popular thing because people can get their prescriptions, etc. without, you know, when they're on a free period, they can make the phone call. Really lands very, very well, that one. You can get some citizenship advice, basic legal advice, and some free counselling. So it's a good package. We also do use, that's how I got involved with Howden. Through Howden, we use Health Assured. We've got a parent and caregiver helpline, and that comes with an app. And so I think Dom was talking about, you know, how do I sort of self-learn support for my son who's got ADHD, or, you know, I teach a student who's got terrible anxiety. how do I get medically accredited, pucker legitimate advice? Well, you can do it through this app, and you get callbacks and you get chats. So we've got like a credit model where we buy the line and the service, and then we get some additional credits we pay for staff supervision, which has landed really well. So getting clinical supervision, teaching and non-teaching, those that deal with safeguarding or challenging special needs, some of the front-facing roles that deal with the parents who aren't always particularly pleasant when they come in with an issue. So that's been useful. But the third P, I think, is my big sell, which is the people-led programs. That's the piece that we've got two sort of strands to that. We've got wellbeing groups in all our schools, and they've got their sort of committed people on that, teaching, non-teaching. They're our wellbeing ambassadors, and each year there's a cycle of a wellbeing action plan that has to be completed with the support of HR, myself in the trust, and the central service kind of provision. That is good, and has come up with good policy ideas, etc. But again, now it's been going a couple of years. If it doesn't revolutionise, you do get a bit of a risk of it's a tick box, so we back that. Probably the most potent is something we do with the children, and then I think for your role this is great because it's something that reminds you of what you do your job for. So I involve all my central team in this, my chief operating officer, my head of estates, anyone that's relevant, the finance team. We have a change makers programme, we call it, and we take a group of year 5s and year 9s, picked from each school. They meet me, we've got this year's one next Tuesday. They come up to the office and meet the CEO and the COO, and they have an allocation of a pot of money, £250 for the primaries each, 500 for the secondaries. When you think what you spend, that is not much, but they have to use that for a positive impact on the well-being of the other pupils in the school. And they come up with amazing ideas. Last year the pupils came up with sort of garden stuff in there, and an eco garden that was going to be somewhere where it could go. The secondaries, it was around wellbeing rooms, and one of the schools already had one, so they went and visited each other's. They looked at the sites, they went round with the estate manager, and it's lovely. You've got year 5s and year 9s working together, gives some identity to the trust, and then at the end, when they've done an action plan, they kind of present that Dragon's Den style to my trust board. I get about 3 or 4 of them who come in, and they love that because they're so aloof, the trust board, they're disconnected from the schools in many ways by 3 layers of governance. They then have this engagement. And so that really costs not much because whether you're giving £50 or £1,000, they're getting money that the pupils can spend on a positive impact for their work. And each year it gets added to, so they kind of pass the baton to the next generation. So there's just a few kind of spread of ideas that we do kind of operationally to kind of push that wellbeing agenda.
Simon, can I just ask one question, because you talked about wellbeing ambassadors. I think you used the term ambassadors.
Yeah.
And I guess given what we've been talking about, how difficult it can be to reach parents, etc., do any of the parents sit as ambassadors within that group? Because it seems like it's being appropriate, of course, it seems like it would be a brilliant opportunity to get a parent's voice feeding into that.
So we haven't got anything sort of distinct like that. I think that's kind of where we are now. We're trying to engage, and I'm going to take the gentleman on board because that's a great, get some of the hard to reach. We've got very engaged parents in all of the schools who are passionate about wellbeing, and lots of those, because they're already engaged, they're already on the governing body, or they're in the PA, or all of those things. But getting the advice from perhaps the forgotten third or English as additional language community, the people who just feel a bit disconnected from the school. We have pop-up hubs where we bring different services together, and we get great engagement with those with our primaries. We get one man and his dog in the secondary version, but we're not giving up on it. We're taking that philosophy, we're ringing people, and we're trying to offer something else there. So the other day we actually had HMRC there doing something around pensions, because they were trying, and that actually brought some people there who, while they were there, we then explained our wellbeing service. There was some counselling they could connect to. The Senko was there. Taking your model actually, Don, to sort of lure them in.
Yes. It's like sneaking carrots into an egg.
So thank goodness for HMRC. They did a lovely pension spiel.
Can I just ask a question?
Of course, please do.
I'm really interested to know how people might address the sort of quieter voices. Like, I work in a special school, and we really try really hard to gather true pupil voice, whether they're verbal, non-verbal, able to communicate with us or not. And we're really conscious that staff and parents that are less likely to speak up when you're asking for engagement are the ones that need the help. Yeah, so just interested to know how you might deal with that.
Do you want me to?
Please do.
I mean, just a thought. I think sometimes it may be helpful as well, I'm sure you're doing all of this, but is to help raise the awareness among, for example, the staff about how important, say, parental well-being is for young person's well-being. So a lot of staff probably thinking, this is my responsibility, this is what I'm dealing with. But maybe starting with education, inset day, something like that, discussion around how seeking out those quieter parents, listening to them, being aware if they're struggling and so on, that it can present in different ways. It may be that they're absent, or it may be that they're over the top. Lots of these things is understanding what's going on for that person. So not just having the focus on the child. So I understand with staff as well, they may also be, and therefore their senior staff will be needing to be aware of that. So there's something about everybody being aware to have their antennae up for any concerning, I wouldn't call them red flags, but flags of they're perhaps struggling, and then taking that time with them then to engage, not just to respond as we often do to the loudest and the most demanding and the ones who are always present or the most enthusiastic. We're always grateful for them because actually they're doing the job that we want them to do. But as you say, it's the quieter ones, it's the less visible ones that we also need to be aware that they may be struggling, and just, I think, widening staff awareness around that is really
a lot of
important as
masking
well.
with SEN children,
Yeah.
and masking
Yeah.
the real feelings, and it just takes another approach to
Yes.
get in there, and that's just getting to know the individual children.
Yes,
isn't it,
for the children.
We have three of our schools have got additional resource bases. One's two of them are ASD, we've got hearing and vision impaired as well. And we find that, but in those areas, the wider SEN team are really good at doing what I'm sure you do, which is engaging those parents. So we might get them along to a performance or something by the students, and then use that as an opportunity to then try and hook them.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Engage them in a wider discussion, again coming back to
And I
that
just
point.
thought, actually, as you've been talking, that for those pupils that we really challenged, we find it a real challenge to get their voice fully observed. That's how we deal with it, and it's no different, really, is it? It's about, Thank you.
Quick question, and it might be to you, Sam, I'm not sure, but I think that at the moment our schools are really good at the parental engagement side of things. They're really part of the community, and that works really, really well. A couple of years ago, we had staff surveys for wellbeing, totally anonymous, and got some really, in my view, good feedback. So some of it was positive and some of it was obviously negative. The leadership teams in the schools reacted in a variety of ways to that. How do you approach that, getting genuine feedback, and then packaging it in such a way so that no offence is taken from the leadership and action happens?
That's a very ripe topic, because we do the same.
Yeah.
And we take it fully on the chin. We do those in the summer, at the end of the summer term. So people go, "Why do we do it in the summer term?" In their heads, that's all they say. But now we need the benchmarks.
Exactly.
And we've been on a lovely trajectory for that. The last 4 years we've done them. And this year by one school they all dipped. And all their heads were going, "We did more this year on wellbeing than we've ever done." And we've gone backwards, and they were devastated.
Yeah.
And then they started sort of projecting to say, well, the trouble is only those who have an issue fill it in, or the trouble is that the support staff were waiting for their pay, so they were because we were waiting for the ratification for the award to be backdated, and all those points were right. That I use a football analogy, so we can only play what's in front of us. So my sort of mantra, and I've got the heads to buy in. In fact, I'm doing a session with them tomorrow because their wounds are a bit raw, and we've got to look after their well-being in it as well. I think the second phase is what I'm calling the lived experience. So we've got the survey with the broad brush, but actually it's a bit like the parent. We don't know their lived experience. So I've put communication. It's nothing to do with the SLT, do 3 newsletters, a staff briefing, a blog, this, that and the other. That's at saturation. The trouble is I work in the English department and no one gets on with one another. and you know, I'm cold-shouldered by the second in English because they got the job that I wanted. That is the real challenge. So how do we get deeper into the lived experience, which I think a lot of it is through doorstepping. It's Greg's asking. I don't think we ask, and it's getting out there. I said to the heads, why don't you just shut the office door, say put the phone on answer phone, 15 minutes. What's peeing you off? Yeah, what frustrating you? Because I think we have these conversations, but we don't go deep. And actually, I think Greg said to me in our informal chat, when you ask someone, how are you? They just go, fine, thanks.
Yeah.
How are you really? You know, is the thing you've got to do. So our real challenge at the moment is what I'm saying, get into the lived experience. You know, what is it like to be a member of that site team with that new site manager who no one likes, and it's not their fault because it's causing dysfunction, and then they don't do their bit properly, so the teacher comes and their bin's not been emptied and they're angry. You know, so we're trying to get deeper into that, and I'm trying to get the heads to accept that's what we've got to do. And I need to do it as CEO when I go in. It's not all smiles and going, hey, I need to say, you know, can I just speak to you five? Not to spy on the head, but, you know, because they like to paint the trust as a bit of a, you know, I put like the Darth Vader as the Empire. When the heads say yes, they say yes. When the heads say no, I'll check with the trust and they've said no. So we're always the no. So we're trying to sort of battle that a little bit.
Can I just add in on that?
Yes,
So it's kind of connected is when you've got staff that are a bit stagnant in the school and there's perhaps some toxic toxicity that comes into it, how do you get them to recognise the efforts that you're doing and the attempts to improve wellbeing and that it's not just another task, that it's not just a tick box, and actually we do care about staff when they've got such a negative, they won't leave.
Yeah.
But they also...
No, we had our best retention stats ever this year, in the year that the staff wellbeing survey went backwards.
It's almost, they're not interested, but, or they just can't see it. How do you change their view and what you're trying to
say
achieve?
they're fine to you, but then they'll go to everyone else that they're not, and it just creates that toxic.
Or, you know, oh, that's a really good idea. Is it? Don't you think that's just a bit rubbish, or we've done that 10 times over?
Well, there was the story of my life in the police. It was everything what we've done now was the point, you know, and it's really, it does take that one toxic person to really hinder that culture that you're trying to achieve. But I think it's constant evaluation. It's going back saying, look, this is what we're doing and this is working here, but we all need to jump on board. And I know, Joe, you were going to ask about, you know, self-care as well. It's, I don't know if you mind if I talk about it now.
No, please do.
With regards to, you know, looking after ourselves, because we need to be looking after ourselves to model what we want the children to, all the attributes we want the children to possess and to embed into their lives. So when we look after one, because when we're healthy, happy, and a good quality of mind, everything is better. Our relationships are better, our behaviour. But I don't think many people know how to be well. I certainly didn't. It took me going through cancer twice and a 2-year dose of PTSD before I was like, I might try and figure out how I work. So I think we need greater education for teachers and parents, where whoever's going to come. But for teachers especially there, because they are, you know, modelling all this, and this is the great thing, going back to, you know, cost-effective ways of doing it. So with my own children, for the children I work with, I don't have any inner monologue.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I don't have any inner monologue, so you don't have to cut into a lesson. I just think, I say everything I'm thinking. So if I'm opening the curtains in the morning, right, let's let some vitamin D in here, brilliant. Does the kids see me exercising in the morning, right, some BDNF and then endorphins being released, brilliant. You know, and I just constantly, if things go wrong when I'm setting up tech for a school, I just turn into a resilience lesson and go, guys, and I've got a whole school behind me, and I'm like, guys, we're resilient, aren't we? We're going to adapt to this, absolutely. And I'm trying to figure it out. But again, I think we can do that just by modelling these things. But it takes us understanding, because I've had parents come up to me and say, oh, you know, Ethan told me all about neuroplasticity after school. You know, I didn't know about that. Do you do you know, lessons for parents as well? So I think when we're in a good place, then that is infectious as well. And when those people are being negative, I think when you've got that culture in place, then it's really hard for them to be negative if you've got everyone else on board. And again, it goes back to empathy. We don't know what's happened in their life. Maybe they're unhappy at home, and maybe they didn't eat that morning, or they're stressed. We don't know. But what I would say is the answer is always kindness, and to keep going with that. because it becomes just the norm. And if you're the one being toxic, suddenly you're the wrong choice of word here, but the abnormal one. You're the one who's not, fulfilling all the wonderful things that we're trying to put in place for these schools. And we need teachers well. We need them happy and enjoying what they do. And you meet someone, and when I meet a teacher who's enthusiastic and loves what they do, it fills my heart, and I think, how wonderful. But it's the most important job in the world, but sadly it's one of the hardest jobs in the world as well. So we need to make that work setting a much kinder, nicer, health-filled place. And that is up to all of us. It's great having strategies, but we also need to look after our own self-care as well.
It's the parents as well that often causing the poor well-being for the teachers.
Yeah.
They're really struggling, especially you have one whole cohort of parents that are just horrible, and then the well-being of the teacher just dips, and then it's just a vicious circle, and it's just trying to tackle those parents, and then they're going to go all through the school, and every teacher's like, I don't want to teach the next year. Someone else happens, and everyone wants to move classes because they don't want that cohort of parents. And that's a real struggle to deal with, that one is.
Yeah. And I've just come in on that as well. I mean, I need it putting my full GP hat on for a second, but sometimes that's a symptom of burnout. As you're probably aware, that level of cynicism and negativity, and nothing ever feels right, and it's all getting at them, and emotional, being worn out. So for people like that, they're going to need quite an individual approach to talk to them, rather than, obviously sometimes it's people's personalities, but if you think actually, is this actually burnout, which is a specific thing that can be looked after, treated and supported and dealt with, then you may win that person back again. So I would just say that's something to bear in mind, because whilst I completely agree, it can be because they're dealing with a very specific situation, that can cause burnout, and therefore they need specific support.
And I think there's also a possible, because I totally agree 100% with everything you said, and actually we had a staff survey thing that said, what percentage of staff were being bullied, and it was like 10%. We suddenly thought we had a workplace issue. When we drew it into it, it was being bullied by parents. Like, just relentless on email, or, feeling like they can't set a detention because Mr. Blah Blah will be moaning about that, and they're on them all. So we got under the skin and found that was a thing, so we actually updated our code of conduct. Just as, those parents are still a pain, but it's symbolising actually, so we can cite this and use that. But also I do think it's the sort of Boston consulting matrix. There is a point where you've used an inordinate amount of energy on 3 people, and you've forgotten the middle 33, you never rock the boat. You know who your stars are, but it's about the cash cows, isn't it? It's the ones that are actually ticking along, and actually with the right attention and feeling known would be the star. And something Greg said really well. When I first became a head teacher, I had a mentor head, and he said to me, you've got to remember that you're going to have now 1 million things in the day to do. But when you walk through the school, every encounter you have to that person is their most important one of the day. To you, it's a pain, because you've got to get to your office, you've got 25 emails to answer. To them, whether it's a year 7, whether it is the cleaner, whether it's the office staff, the head of English, a parent, I spoke to the head teacher. And actually, I always carry that with me, because now as the CEO, it's the light as the CEO, you go stop and have a chat, and it's the things about, I hear you, congratulations, you've had a baby, or they feeling known, I think. And I think that is, schools are just reflecting what's happening in society, aren't they? Everyone is cheesed off, disaffected, angry, and they probably don't even know what act.
I got the 5-minute warning 6 minutes ago, so I'm really sorry. I'm not being a very good facilitator. I know that we could talk for so much longer on this, but we are going to have to draw it to a close, because I know everybody's got somewhere else to go. We were hoping to do key takeaways, but
I've ruined that joke.
yeah, it's fine. But what I would say, just a couple of things. The guys are going to be on the stand with us. I'm not sure how long they're going to stick around for, but if you want to have a one-on-one discussion, a chat with anything that we haven't got time to cover, we're on stand 64, please do pop along. And on your tables, please do take one of the cards that we put on with the speakers' profiles, because there's a QR code on there that will take you to a resource bank that the panel have fed into, so please do. And thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for the panelists as well.